And now over to Howard Ratner, Director of Development from Chorus.
All right. So, as many of you know, I was part of the DOI initiative. I was part of the founding of CrossRef, the founding of Clocks, the founding of ORCID, was involved with FundRef. So I guess I must like this stuff. So when Susan King, Thane Kerner, Pat Kelly, and Fred Dillow all came to me and said, would you be interested in getting involved in Chorus? It was a very natural yes from me. But today, thanks to all the good questions, I need to move quickly to take you through what is just under about 40 great slides. So let's just get right to it. So as it says here, Chorus is a broad coalition of scholarly journal publishers formed to develop, implement, and steward a partnership with the federal research funders for providing public access to the peer-reviewed publications that report on federally funded research. That's the first part. But I'm also pleased to announce that we've incorporated as Core Inc., which is a standalone, not-for-profit entity formed on October 1st, so pretty fresh. We will be applying for 501c3 status in the United States. Now, the reason that we did it as Core Inc. is because we wanted Core Us to be the very first service and focus. And we will also consider other international services in the future as we go. But let's talk about our goals. You moving us down? There, okay. Thanks, Joe. Yep. Its goals are to fully meet all requirements of the February 22nd OSTP memorandum that you heard, to leverage existing infrastructure, remember that, existing infrastructure and investment of the agencies and publishers. We want to preserve agency funds for mission-critical activities and programs. We don't want them spending monies on doing what we all do. And we want to provide for international scalability over time. I'm not talking about tomorrow. So Chorus owes a large part to CrossRef's FundRef service, and I know Ed's here in the audience today. And the FundRef pilot started over 2 years ago, where CrossRef publishers and funding agencies worked together to develop a system to identify articles resulting from agency funding, and it launched in May of this year. And honestly, without FundRef, a lot of these discussions wouldn't have been able to take place. But whenever you develop a product or a service, you should identify the key stakeholders and figure out what might drive them to use such a service, or in other words, what they want. So Chorus has defined around 10 personas, but today I'm only going to mention the top 4. Now keep in mind, personas are about what the stakeholder desires. It does not mean that every desire can or should be delivered. So our first persona, and arguably the most important for Chorus, is Alan, the agency department head. First and foremost, Alan wants to meet the OSTP guidelines. He wants to measure grantee and agency compliance with the guidelines. He wants to show how his agency's investments are having impact or return on investment, as many of us say in this room. He wants to know who his agency is funding. He wants to have access to or be fed reporting information at agreed upon intervals. But he also wants to provide access to the best available version of articles resulting from agency funding. And by best available, what I mean is either the accepted manuscript or the version of record, okay? So those are just some of the things that Alan wants to be able to do. And as you see, there's a ... there, because there's a lot more. And I don't want to go through each and every one, because we don't have time today. But let's talk about Rachel. So Rachel's the researcher, or principal investigator. Now, she wants to obtain funding for her research, obviously. She also wants to meet her agency's guidelines. Okay, so there's a trickle-down effect going on here. She wants to know the sources of funding in her area of research. She does want to have access also to the best available version. She wants to be able to extract metadata and entities, maybe do some text mining if she's particularly sophisticated. But ultimately, she wants to get recognition for her research, and she also wants to upload information into a system once and have it be used by many. She wants to avoid extra administrative work. We've heard a lot about that today, so that seems to be a theme. Now, here's the one that we all know and love, Paul the publisher. So he wants to help authors and agencies meet agency and government guidelines, otherwise why am I standing here? He wants to offer access to the best available version of his content. He wants to provide persistent access to that content. It's part of the publisher mission. He wants to sustain his business model, otherwise he can't do it. He wants to get recognition by the scholarly research community for contribution as a publisher. And he wants to also know what institutions are publishing what kind of research, but Paul does want to attract the best authors, editors, the best societies, but ultimately, he wants to drive the eyeballs and clicks back on his website. And then in turn, then possibly develop new services, and then also know who funded the research, but again, avoiding extra administrative work. So finally, we have Peter the public. They have a stake in this too. So Peter wants to have access to the best available version because he may or may not think that this could affect him in his daily life. He also wants to see what the government is funding, right? Particularly wants to understand where his tax money is going. He wants to learn the impact of specific agency grants. He wants to understand the latest developments in science. And he wants to understand what he's seeing by being given context and guidance. And then finally, particularly if he's in education, he wants to have that content connected to learning tools. But those are just the personas, and that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about what you've been waiting for, which is the chorus design and services. And so initially, there are 4 main services. And all services have a website as well as an underlying API for developers. So here's the overall conceptual design. Okay? So remember that Chorus is all about leveraging existing infrastructure. So you start by reading from the top left, and you have number 1. So here we've got the authors, and we're all familiar with those. And they're going to submit their manuscript to a publisher via their various different manuscript tracking system. And there are a few of those. It's here where publishers should be collecting the normal bibliographic information, such as metadata. And they're also going to collect agency information and grant award information. But interestingly, here is also where they can capture the ORCID IDs of the contributors, and then all of that will then flow through the publisher's production system, and then when the article is then ready for publication, we move to number 2, that big red area that we see there. And here is where the publisher submits all of the information to CrossRef. CrossRef then enables various different services that Chorus and others can possibly leverage. CrossRef will then archive its metadata to one or more archival services, and the publisher needs to do the same. But then number 5 comes along, and this is important. The user, right, this is what we're about, the user will want to use a portal. And that portal could be hosted at a government agency, could be at their university, could be their favorite commercial search engine, maybe Google Scholar or Academic Search, to name 2, or could be the Chorus search engine itself. The search results, however, all lead via DOI links back to the publisher's site, or in a very rare circumstance, it could lead to the archival version. And we'll talk more about that. So, as I mentioned, there are 4 main services. The first service is our Chorus dashboard. It's a system for monitoring and tracking publisher contributions to the Chorus system. Compliance is an important part of the OSTP memorandum, and Chorus wants to help agencies enforce it. So let's just move on here. So here is where we are still experimenting with the best display for our dashboard. And our latest iteration looks like this. This data that you're seeing here is obviously a mock-up of where we think we might be in December. So what you see in here is you see the top left, you see the number of deposits for articles from research funded by a specific agency. The bottom left is our license audit, where we track the number of tags that have been added regarding licensing, and it says which ones have been approved or unapproved by the agency, okay, or possibly unknown. And then we have the bottom middle, which is our accessibility audit, which is where Chorus will be testing the public accessibility of the publisher's content. So finally, on the bottom right, we have the archive audit. It tracks the number of deposits made to dark archives that have been approved by the agency. if you were to scroll down on our live site, you will see that we have the publisher records. And so here you have where our pilot publishers have submitted some records, which is IEEE, Blackwell, Elsevier, AIP, ACS, and others. But I'm going to quickly do a gambling thing, and I'm going to switch to our live site. Let's see if this works. One more time? Risky. Yeah, it's risky. Okay. And let's just make sure we can do this. Okay. So it's loading. And here, what we should see over here, and it's taking its time. Now, that might, let's see. All right. It's taking too much time, so the wireless is giving us a hard time. We'll switch back. Okay. That's why we have screenshots here. Okay. I am happy to say that all of you, this is public. So all of you can go to dashboard.chorusaccess.org, okay, and then put in /USDOA, or change it to NSF, or change it to USDA, and you'll see the dashboards. Now, keep in mind, you're not going to see very much today. Why? Because we're busy populating this database. So it's going to grow over time. That's the idea of doing a pilot, is you want to see something grow. Let's talk about our, there we go. Next slide, there, okay, is our discovery service. So this is service number 2. And this is for content resulting from agency research again. And this is being powered by FundRef. Now, agencies can use the Chorus Discovery Service API to feed their own portals, or end users can directly use the Chorus search website. And customized versions of the Chorus website can be created for agencies. So here's an example. So the Chorus search service at search.chorusaccess.org, okay, we try to make this really easy, right, is powered by the FundRef registry. It's a taxonomy of 4,000 funder names, abbreviations, and alternate names donated by Elsevier. And that really helps when you start typing things in. So when a user, in this case, starts typing U.S. Department of E, you see it pops down and gives you some choices. And if we selected the Department of Energy, okay, you get results. It looks pretty normal, like we see. But what's new and interesting is the facets on the left-hand side. So here you have the DOE offices and directorates in the left panel. And then the journals on the right. And this shows about 1,300 results, because I did this morning, from our relatively small POC data set. And these have been submitted again by ACS, AIP, APS, Wiley, IEEE, and OUP, and Elsevier. And it's from a very small set from 2011 through 2013. Now, there are more facets below the fold. And in one of the facets on that left-hand side is facets by subject area. And so here, what we've done is we've actually clicked on and highlighted the molecular biology area, okay? And what it has done, it has reduced that 1,300, roughly, data set to around 50. And here you can see that we have results coming from Elsevier and AIP. And when I click on the DOI link for the biomicrofluidics entry, it takes me to the AIP publication site like so. Now, this particular article from AIP is not open access, and it's not past any kind of embargo. So the user is presented with the usual options for obtaining the full text. Now, if there were an embargo, and it was post-embargo, some public access options for the best available version would be available here. Fear not, I'm going to show you some of those. Okay, so here's an example from Elsevier. And this is an article from Structure. And this one is gold open access. So obviously, if it's gold open access, when you follow the PDF link, you're going to openly get the PDF file. Okay? Now, if I move to a different example from the American Physical Society, or APS, one of the two APSs in the room, they chose to do an author manuscript. And here you can see this is an author manuscript from 2011, and they've done this nice little logo thing, which, by the way, we didn't ask them to do that, but we might steal that idea, because I think it's a kind of a nifty idea. And the idea there would be if you click on that, and that will then link to that DOI link at the bottom, and once again, you are met with a PDF file of that manuscript. It's very clean and easy. And I could show all of you this during the break. But that doesn't end there, right? Because not every agency is going to want to play that way, right? So some agencies, like the Department of Energy, right, will want to take the API that we have and be able to deliver their own portal, and that's fine. So in this case, it's the Department of Energy's Office of Scientific and Technical Information. They're going to collect information via the Chorus system, and by that I mean metadata, and then link out to the publisher's site for full-text articles. And this is what it actually is shaping up to look like. Now, they're not live today. In fact, they're probably not even open today. But this is what they've been building, and they've given me privy to see it. And actually, if some of you are interested, I can share with you what it looks like, although, again, with the government being shut down, I don't know that I can do it today. But the OSTP memorandum calls for the ability to search, retrieve, and analyze the content. That's what it said. So Chorus's third service, our text mining service, enables this. It utilizes the CrossRef prospect service. Now, the CrossRef prospect service, you have to put your propellers on here a little bit, okay, because remember, we're talking about text and data mining, uses a common API to be used by researchers to access the full text of content. It also includes a license registry which transparently shows what terms apply, which is great for OA publishers and non-OA publishers alike. And it provides a click-through agreement of TDM licenses, text and data mining licenses, if needed. Okay, so here's a diagram to show how this works. And it's working today. So on the upper left side there, you've got the publisher depositing the license and the full text metadata into CrossRef prospect. At that point, honestly, the content is then ready for the TDM service. At the bottom, that little blue person, you've got the researcher identifying articles of interest using whatever discovery service they might usually use. Again, Google Scholar, what have you, doesn't matter. Researchers register with Prospect using their ORCID ID and then receive a Prospect API token. Now, the researcher would then have to review and agree by clicking through to publisher licenses, and those could be simple or complicated. That's up to you. Now, if it's an OA or public access content, they get immediate access to the PDF or the XML, but if this is subscription content, they can still get access, but what happens is content negotiation happens behind the scenes, and that's where you get to this right-hand side. So when that content negotiation happens, the publisher's access control system, again, doesn't matter who it is, the publisher has their own system. They will need to check the researcher's Prospect API token, and then also check that the user has agreed to the terms and conditions. That's it. Once they've done that, they then get entree right to the PDF files or XML, depending on what the publisher has decided. So the OSTP memorandum also states that the agency solution must provide for long-term preservation. So Chorus Service 4 addresses this. This is the last of the services, folks, for today. We are aiming to leverage existing dark archive infrastructure via clocks and/or Portico, while also exploring the best way to build a low-cost government-maintained or other third-party dark archive. Chorus will help with the agreements, and we're already doing a lot of that, auditing the processes, and reporting this on the dashboard that we've already shown you. So this should come as no surprise to all of you. Here's the usual trigger events. Publisher's no longer in business, the title's no longer authored, it has catastrophic failure of some variety, or the article is just no longer accessible. Chorus is investigating methods for checking the accessibility of the public access articles and wants to ensure agencies that publishers are very serious about the commitment to digital preservation. So here are just two use cases that I want to go through. So case number 1. This is where the publisher closes public access to a public access article, for whatever the reasons might be. Okay? Chorus would then trigger the lighting of the article based on agency criteria. Chorus then would then send an alert to that publisher and the agency. The agency would then contact the publisher to determine the cause and impact. So that's a manual check that the agencies seem to want to do. They want to then email, phone, whatever they need to do to contact them. If it's not resolvable, okay, the agency or Chorus would then trigger the lighting of that article. The agency or Chorus would then instruct the host archive to make the article publicly accessible. And the agency redirects links for that article on their portal system, obviously, to that host archive. again, following the DOI system, again, thanks to Ed and the CrossRef system. And then there's the inverse, which I won't go through, but you can imagine that if it all of a sudden becomes lit again, we can turn all that off and make it work the same way with the same kind of alerting. So what have we been doing regarding this pilot thing that we've got going now? Well, we've developed 3 agreements. The first agreement is between Chorus and the pilot publishers. The second agreement, which is signed, is between Chorus and a host archive service, which is Deep Web Technologies, for now. And then we also have an agreement pending with Chorus and interested agencies. And you can imagine why it's pending. And then there are just basically, we already have publishers that are very interested in starting to submit their PDF files, and they're working through that literally as we are all sitting here, sending those PDF files for the articles that are already publicly accessible to the host archive, just to be in compliance and be in good partnership with the agencies. But that's not going to stop there, because we know that there's a post-pilot solution that's looming out there. And that will happen in phase 2 of Chorus. And here's where we're going to work with agencies and existing digital preservation services such as Clocks and Portico, because Clocks and Portico also have constituents that they need to consult. And so we're going to work through that. In fact, I've got a meeting set up tomorrow with some of them. So here's a graphic laying out the desires of the public and the researcher, the government agencies, and the hosting archives against which they would access the content. It shows how some publishers want content directly pulled from their presentation websites, while others would rather push content from their internal content management systems. In the end, it doesn't matter. Chorus needs to help with all of these situations. So our pilot phase, of course, has goals. And against these goals, we will figure out proper measures. So there are 2 pages of them, so that I made them big so you can read them. 1, we want to show how publishers can work together to broaden access to the content. We want to demonstrate the public-private partnership stuff between the publishers and the agencies. We want to also point to publicly accessible content on the publisher sites in a very cost-efficient and consistent manner. But that's really at the heart of what Chorus is about. We want to demonstrate this dashboard, right, which is really going to show a lot of transparency for the first time ever, I think, in the industry. We want to also uncover the issues when you start dealing with archiving of publicly accessible content. It seemed when I started this that it would seem slam dunk very easy. But as soon as you start getting into the discussions about, what are proper triggers, et cetera, there are issues. And that's why we have pilots. We want to uncover the needs and desires, hidden needs and desires perhaps, of agencies and publishers. For example, when we were discussing with one of the agencies, we discovered that actually, what we call grants, that's something called extramural research, right? But they've got big issues with intramural research. Their staff actually publish things too, okay? They want to be able to somehow get this in a manner that's far more efficient than what they've been able to do so far. And so it's a very natural fit for a clearinghouse like Chorus. We also want to be able to integrate with the agency portals, again, assuming the government comes back online. And we want to think through the legal agreements, okay? The reason that we really want to have the pilot and work through the pilot over these next few months is we are discovering all sorts of internal processes that need to get tweaked and fixed, right? That the publishers themselves need to solve for themselves. But ultimately, all this leads to facilitate open discussion between publishers, agencies, institutions, librarians, researchers, and public stakeholders by making the pilot system as public and open as possible. So, first thing is publishers need to become a signatory of Chorus, right? That's right now at no cost. We'll talk about membership models perhaps in 2014, but for right now, just become a signatory. The second thing is to become a member of CrossRef. You need to do that because otherwise you can't play with FundRef, right? But good news, FundRef is just part of the CrossRef membership. You need to submit agency-related data to that FundRef for all new content, and I think you've heard it, other systems want it too. You also need to send license and embargo information to CrossRef, because that's how we do that magic with Prospect. And then also the full text URIs go there too. And if you want to be part of the pilot, I'd be very happy to have you become part of that, but I'll need you to sign the pilot agreement just so you understand what you're getting into. And then ultimately, as I mentioned, you'll need to send the relevant content to the host archive service. So I've had some questions about our timeline and where we are. And so you can see that right now we're in our pilot phase, and we're also doing fundraising. And we're going to review the pilot at the end of the year, and our intention is to go into production in early 2014. Yes, it's aggressive, but remember, we're using things that already exist. So this is our spanking new website that is at chorusaccess.org. You're all welcome to access it via your mobile devices or laptops or what have you. It all works. We try to keep it as up to date as possible. And I encourage you all to sign up today. And you could do that actually at chorusaccess.org. And I'd love to have you help us with any of our fundraising efforts, which would be terrific. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Howard. Thank you. I'm going to open the floor for questions now, and I see Dick Rudick over there.
Thank you. This question is based on, the premise of this question is based on a quote from my favorite intellectual property lawyer, Abraham Lincoln, whose private law practice included not copyrights, but patents. And at a speech at a small college in Illinois, the late 1850s, he referred to intellectual property as adding the fuel of interest to the fire of genius. Now, I noticed that neither Paul the publisher or Peter the public, if I remember their names correctly, said anything about money. It didn't seem to be very interesting to them. And, but that doesn't seem realistic. And one of the things that publishing involves is harnessing private capital, ultimately for the public good. So, hope I'm not going off topic, but if you think in terms of that function of publishing, what's the goal here? Is it to drive costs out of the system? Is it neutral? Is the money irrelevant and we're only solving other problems?
Okay. Business models were mentioned. The publisher wants to sustain its business model, no matter what it is. So that was mentioned. So that money is kind of implied there. As far as I am concerned, and having been an IT and production guy for so many years, too many years, driving cost out of the system is really important. Making sure that there's no duplication of effort is really important. But the business guy in me says, we all publishers want to drive traffic to our sites so that we, can make sure that they're stewarded content, and possibly if we have advertising on our sites, great, we can grow that. If we have a site license model, we can grow that as well. I don't want to go into too much detail because then I'm speaking on behalf of the publishers. That's up to them. But the point is to drive down the cost, get rid of any duplicative efforts, and then ensure that business models that the publishers already have can be sustained.
Howard, I want to add to your answer there. How much time at these meetings, this STM Association, SSP, ALPS, PSP, do we spend talking about the demands of public access and other potential demands of governments? So if the entire publishing community can get together like we appear to be doing on this, to have a pan-publisher, pan-funding agency, universal solution that drives public access, we save a lot of extraneous costs by developing this universal solution. I think that's an important part of saving resources and not duplicating resources for a public service.
Thank you, Fred.
Robert Harrington from the American Mathematical Society. I was just curious how you would describe a possible relationship with ArchiveX.
Haven't had the discussion, Robert. It's a good idea. So thank you. Take a note on that.
Other questions? Yes? Oh.
Right
there.
There.
Steve.
Joy, I'm begging your patience by reminding people about evaluation forms to get a couple more minutes. Ready? Perfect. Steve.
Yeah, Steve Moreau and John Wiley. Is it okay to ask a question of John? You referenced earlier the natural suspicions of your university constituencies against publishers. Is there anything in this presentation that is flashing a red warning signal for you, or not?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of bad stuff because you guys have got so much capacity. No, I think this just looks terrific. I think there are going to be one of the things actually is that, and I've talked to a number of folks here about this, and in our own community. What exactly are what will the capacity for the public using post-embargo content, how can we use it, and in what ways? I think the university community is trying to think about all of this capacity post-embargo. I've said, I think to the shock of Alicia at one point, that I tend to think of the entire content of post-embargo material as essentially public domain. Anybody can use it for any purpose, free, no cost, and I don't think that is the view of many publishers, that there is still costs that you see. There are the interests in driving eyeballs to the publisher's website. But I think that what I see in Chorus is this tremendous capacity that you have, as Howard said, existing capacity, and trying to figure out where we can have overlapping views in terms of post-embargo content, and under what terms. Howard mentioned text mining, that there are licensing terms. I suspect there are a lot of folks in the university community who would say, well, no, you don't license it, you just do it. But there are also practical problems. Fred and I had a conversation about NIH's PubMed Central unease about the consequences of perhaps inadvertently messing up an enormous database by somebody charging in to do a bunch of text mining and screwing everything up. So there are a lot of complications there. But I think that I see largely here a tremendous capacity for collaboration, identifying areas either where we have differences or don't know whether we do or not is a work in progress. So I hope we will continue conversations to further that.
Hi, Tony Derniak from IEEE. John, one thing you just said continues to trouble me in this whole discussion. The fact that information, once it's published, should be available for the public good. Most of the universities that I'm aware of have significant technology licensing programs. Does this mean you're going to close all your technology licensing programs?
No. I think that's a completely different operation. And another example is university professors and textbooks. Should we make them open access? There actually is some work that AAU is working on, the Mellon Foundation. The articles, the copyrighted articles that become available, post-embargo. When I say public domain, the things that I think are important are maintaining the integrity of the work, accurate citation of the work, so the original author gets credit, not degrading or distorting work. So public domain is probably an overstatement, but I think what I was trying to get at is the notion that without destroying content, people would be able to freely use content. I see that as different from universities with federally funded research, inventions that result, Bayh-Dole legislation allowing universities to retain patent and licensing rights, moving that into the private sector for development. That's not an issue of copyrighted work. It's an issue of patented work that, and by the way, this is somewhat controversial within the university community. There are some faculty and others who think universities should never patent anything. I think there's overwhelming evidence that the practical impact of allowing universities to retain patent rights provides the incentive to get content, to get that patented content, those inventions, into the private sector for development. The whole patent system, it's a different operation. It's allowing a company to have a 20-year monopoly as a quid pro quo for making that invention public to the rest of the world. So I see that as a different issue, and that what we're talking about here in terms of making copyrighted content available for reuse for the benefit of the broader good is a different process from technology transfer, which is, in some respects, a closed system, and pragmatically so. I hope that makes sense.
Anthony Watkins, and I just thought it'd be give an opportunity to Howard and Susan to say that obviously, and as you've mentioned in passing, Chorus will continue closely to work with the universities as much as possible. I think it's worth, if I may say, I think it's worth saying that in response to what John has just said.
Thank you, absolutely.
Yes, Ralph Schaffner with Ringgold. It seems to me that one of the things that hasn't been mentioned is that most research has a negative result. It's important it has a negative result, but it doesn't need to be publicized, and the fact that it has been done once, we're done with it. And it's similar, I think, also to the patent issues. That is, in one case it's a copyright, and in another case it's a patent, but in both cases it's an attempt to protect. So the embargo is, I think, useful, but I think you go too far when you make it public domain after that.
Thank you very much. And one of the things I was just talking to Howard about is the fact that, when building Chorus, built as a framework that can be developed further, certainly many federal agencies already collect research reports from those that they fund, and perhaps a potential to think about pointing to those via Chorus as well to publicly available articles reporting on federal research. Well, I am mindful that I have terribly abused Jane and Joe's time schedule, so thank you for that. I'd like to end this session now. I'd like to remind you to fill in your evaluation forms, which are in front of you in your pack. And I'd also like to remind folks that for those that are staying here for the book fair, that Howard will be presenting on Chorus on Wednesday between 1 to 2:30 in Hall 4.1. So, thank you very much for your time and attention. Thank you, Howard. Thank you, John. And enjoy your break.